All right, here's something you may never have considered before. Sex is sexist. I'm going to unpack what that means, but I want to let you know that there are some practical things, especially dads, I'm talking to you today, that we can do to help bring equality back into the dynamics between men and women, especially when it comes to the sexual relationship. So I'm going to talk about some things today that you might be a little sensitive to, so I just want to give you a warning about that. But we have to talk about some of these difficult issues, because the reality is, and I want you to really consider this, think about this with me, generally speaking, in the dynamics between men and women in sexual relationships, physical relationships, and the dynamics there, the scales are turned and are balanced against women. When it comes to sex, women are the ones that usually suffer more than men. Okay, it's just built into the system, and I want to unpack this for you because that might sound a little radical to some of you. But think about, number one, sexual harassment itself, catcalling, right? Women are usually on the receiving end of that kind of culture that we have in the world today. And I want you to think about it this way. I heard some friends of mine say it this way. Imagine if you're a young woman walking down the street and a car drives past and these guys lean out the window and they're whistling and they're catcalling, hey baby, you look a certain way or whatever, you look great or you look hot or something. Well, how does that make a woman feel, right? Unsafe, gross. Now flip it real quick and imagine if it's a young man walking down the street and a car of young ladies drives past and they start whistling and, hey baby, you know, you look awesome and hot or whatever. Well, how does the guy respond? He's like, yeah, man, I feel good, you know what I'm saying? Not threatened, he doesn't feel unsafe, or he feels like bolstered, right? I'm not saying that these are the best reactions to have. I'm just saying, isn't that weird how things are imbalanced like that? What about sexual assault and the power dynamics? Of course, this is what we're seeing in, thankfully, this Me Too movement, of at least the core part of it, which is exposing how men have taken power, seats of power in culture, and have abused that power to use it against women in a sexual way. And of course, there's tons of examples of that. Number three, just rape itself, being attacked. You know, men, if you're listening, like how often do you go out to your car in a parking lot, or maybe it's sunset or at night, and you're trying to figure out, okay, if someone attacks me, here's my key, or I'm going to blow a whistle, or I'm carrying something in my purse to defend myself. I mean, not a lot of men think that. It's an imbalance that exists, just naturally and sort of also in our culture. The hypersexualized culture that we live in as well is something to consider. The magazine covers, the stuff that you see in malls, I mean, every commercial, all the stuff out there that's hypersexualized mainly is hypersexualized against women. And think about also just body image issues on social media. And I was just talking to a couple of young women the other day, just asking them, what is it like being you? As a teenager, seeing all these things and thinking about your image and comparing yourself to others, all of that pressure. Now, men have that as well to some degree, but nowhere near what women deal with. Am I right? How about pornography itself, right? Of course, we know that it's getting worse and worse. Women are getting more and more addicted, but way by and large, it is an awful industry that abuses, dehumanizes, and uses sex as a weapon against women. And of course, that's also, number 6, connected to sex trafficking, or whatever number we're on. This is an industry that is prostituting, that is attacking, that is using women for the profit and for the sexual pleasure of men alone, mainly, all over the world. Pregnancy, okay? Even if it's desired, there are natural consequences, so to speak, that are women have to suffer and walk through that men just don't. And what does it do to their career? What if they're pregnant in high school and they can't finish? And there's so many different things that can happen, both wanted and unwanted in pregnancy. Now, you could flip it and say, I, as a man, will never also experience a life growing inside of me and that miracle. So you can flip that and breastfeeding and the attachment. So I know there's some there, but you hear what I'm saying, right? There's a ton of things. Yes, every woman's nodding right now, their head. But if you think about unwanted pregnancy too, I mean, that is just something, not just physically, but then emotionally, that is usually way more weighing on a woman and that decision. And of course, politically, no matter where you stand, or socially where you stand, or philosophically, spiritually on abortion, just think about technically, who is the one that's sitting in that office? Who's the one that is having to deal with that? Where's the boyfriend? Where's the guy? out with some other woman running around town. Like, where are these dudes? Right? The scales are balanced against. I was told a story once of someone who worked with a woman. This was, decades ago, and every anniversary of her abortion at work, she just wouldn't show up, and people didn't understand. And where is she at? And she eventually shared, with this man that I've spoken with, of just how emotionally, just dealing with stuff, and what she had to deal with. It was a dark, again, I don't know where that guy is, or what he's dealing with, or what he had to walk through, or some women, that things can go wrong physically, and maybe they can't have children again or something. It's like, there's just a lot of things, and I'm not trying to get political as I'm saying this. I'm just trying to tell you, think about this. And if you're a young man especially, and I hope you are listening to me, have you thought about these kinds of issues? Sex itself is sexist. When you think about how culture portrays, Hollywood portrays, it's usually driven by the man. It's usually centered around his pleasure. And we can talk about this later when we talk about marriage and sexual issues in marriage. But even in the most healthy kind of dynamics, usually men are raised to think about themselves. Usually that's how the sexual relationship is geared around, and women may not always get the best reality out of that. Again, I know this might be uncomfortable for you to hear, but I just want you to be thinking about these dynamics. And finally, something that many of you may not know, and we really, mom and dad, need to be speaking to our kids about this, are sexually transmitted infections. We call them infections now. In the 90s, it was STDs with diseases, but a lot of these things have like morphed and evolved, and I'm not an expert, I'm just telling you when I read this stuff. It's freaky because the reason we call it infection is that you don't know you have it. And you're passing it along, and a lot of guys are lying about who they've slept with or whatever, and then just passing it along to women, and vice versa too. But here's this. I think it's chlamydia. That is a super dangerous STI for women, in the sense that it can lead to ectopic pregnancies, scarring in the fallopian tubes. They can't get pregnant. Yet a man can continue to have children with the same STI that a woman can have and cause her to be infertile. Not just to say all the other stuff of the burning, all the other stuff that has to go down. Now, we live in a world that is just like this. It's broken in many ways and fallen, and this is just our natural selves. But it is imbalanced, and it's sexist, both culturally and because of the evil in the world and just some of the natural dynamics that exist. It is imbalanced against women. And I'm sorry to have to speak about some of these things, but you need, and dads, you need to hear this. Young men, you need to hear this. So what is the solution, and what can we do? And dads, I'm looking at you mainly when I say this. We must raise our sons to be young men who honor, protect, and treat the women in their lives with equality and empowerment, knowing that this imbalance exists. It needs to be a new culture that we have to create, and it needs to be very practical when it comes to day-by-day life. And I want to share a couple things with you and ways to do that. But we need to train our sons because of this imbalance. And I thank God for all, like women and women empowerment, and let's go women, and women are meeting together, and we have to do that. But where are the men in this movement? Women can only go so far, so to speak. Do you hear what I'm saying? If there's no demand, if there's no pressure, if there is more understanding from the men, it's going to radically transform the world that women live in, isn't it? And so it is time for us as dads and as coaches and as leaders and mentors, whatever we do when we have young men in our lives, including and starting with our sons, we have to take the lead to raise them to be fighters, to step up and to say, hey, I understand the imbalance. And in our relationship, or in our sexual or physical relationship, I'm not going to imagine a world where men aren't pressing for sexual relationships or unhealthy sexual relationships. Imagine if it was the opposite. Imagine this now. This might be a stretch. But is it possible that we could have a world where instead a young man would say, hey, let's delay that. Hey, let's wait on that. And the woman's like, no, I'm ready. I want to have sex. Like whatever it is. Imagine a world where she's like, what are you doing? Why aren't you touching me? And he's like, yo, I'm not, because I know what could happen. Are you ready do you understand the consequences of that? Let's talk about it. Let's walk through that. Could you imagine a world where a man had that in his mind and in his worldview versus the opposite, which is me and my sexual pleasure and what can I get out of you now? Well, it might seem far off, but listen, if you don't have faith for that, and I don't mean like religious faith, I'm saying you have to change the culture, and we've got to change the way the world is. It's changing around us, and we can do something about it. So, I know I'm ranting a little bit here. Okay. Dads, number one, I want to encourage you to get this book. I'm just hitting you with a solution and the call to action at the same time. Whoever you are, young man, I don't care if you're 25 years old, moms, get this book. It's called Girls and... I mean, you can do a bunch of different books, but I just want you to start. If you don't know where to start, Dean, I get it, I'm with you, I'm getting inspired, whatever. How can we change the world? Okay, it starts with just like a book like this. Girls Uncovered, and it walks through the pregnancy issues and how some of these... This is where I got that idea that sex is sexist, emotional dynamics of this, and the STIs. And I don't mean for you just to read this with your daughters. In fact, I haven't read this with my 14-year-old like I have with my first son, my second son. It's like when my boys are like 12, 13, I'm like, all right, buckle up. It's the STI chapter. We're going for it. And my older sons know. They're like, ooh, are you doing the STI chapter? It's like, it's your time, bro. Here we go. Because it hits you hard. It's a lot. But you gotta wake up, and young men, we've got to wake up to the realities of this. Here's another great book. Sorry, I don't have a cover on it. It's called American Girls. Can you see that? I don't know if you can. Nancy Jo Sales, thank you so much for your incredible work with this. The hypersexualized culture in which we live, especially on social media, it's like a walk through that across America from various ages of young women. And again, I do walk with my daughter through this book. We talk about it, but for young men as well. Okay, so number two, men, we have to change the culture in our families. We have to be the role models. We have to step up and do that. And thirdly, I want to say this. We need a men's movement, honestly. And I don't know, that might sound weird to you or something, and maybe that triggers you, but we desperately need a movement where men can gather and get convicted and learn practical ways that we can jump into the fight to empower women, and thus the relationships that we have between men and women and young men and women in our culture. And dads, it's our time, men. It's our time to step up and do that, okay? Hey, listen, if you don't know how to read books and have this, what I call book time with your sons, I want to encourage you to go over to familytechgameplan.com, and I walk you through some of the steps there, of course, in the course, the online course that I can invite you into when you watch that I invite you into when you watch the free webinar. It takes you through that, really equips you step by step on how to do that. But I encourage you to start there and really start implementing these things today. We've got to step up, mom and dad, and especially dad, this message for you today. I really want you to watch this with your sons. Watch this with your spouse and say, what can I do today? Because we can no longer sit on the sidelines. We've got to jump in and take a leadership role in this. I know you can do it. I'm with you in this too. Talk to you soon.